I first read Kafka when I was an art student here in Oxford. We studied human anatomy as part of the art course in the first year, and I was really interested in the human form, especially the human skeletal form, but at the same time I was making sculptural works with organic materials and starting to collect insects as well. And one of my tutors said, you know, you should read Kafka's The Metamorphosis. It really struck a chord. The weird kind of unsettling bizarreness of it felt appropriate, although I didn't then read any more of his works. Reading that then led me to the works of the Czech animator Jan Svankmajer, who works with stop motion animation, and felt quite inspired by that and the idea of kind of imbuing the sculptural works with a narrative and the desire to animate them as well. So for there to be movement and action and a story. So I was starting to make human skeletal forms from twigs, but also at the same time experimenting with stop motion animation. And these skeletons evolved into kind of, they shrunk, evolved into skeleton fairies with wings, and then which led to kind of using insects more and more in the work because I was at that scale now. And then I always wanted them to actually be alive, for the stories to be real. My installations now are essentially they're kind of action scenes frozen. They're stories, they're action scenes frozen in motion, and then the viewer kind of reanimates it in their mind. Responding to the metamorphosis as an artist who works with insects was a bit challenging because Kafka was quite adamant that Gregor shouldn't be visually represented, and it's not clear what sort of insect he is. He's definitely some sort of arthropod, but sometimes he's portrayed as a cockroach or a beetle, but it's not quite clear. And actually, I think that gave me more freedom and I took the kind of followed the translation of he woke up as a monstrous vermin, to kind of think about more generally insect pests and vermin and our relationship with them and how we persecute them, but everything is part of the natural community. Yeah, Gregor is not one insect, and then I kind of, as the work developed, I think I was reading more of Kafka's animal stories, becoming immersed in those worlds. I started to include references to Kafka's other stories, some of his other animal stories. There were lots, but for example, the Burrow and Report to an Academy, Odradek. So there's kind of, the piece evolved as I was making it and encompassed more of Kafka's work, and I became more immersed in his worlds and his kind of his understanding of animals. So yeah, the piece is called Insect Enemies, and I think the starting point was actually a pile of books. When I did a site visit in the previous exhibition, in that vitrine was a pile of books, and that stayed with me. And then after that, the Bodleian staff showed me the entomology books that they were thinking of including in the case. So old entomology books, but also Darwin, Origin of Species, and Haeckel, and so I was thinking about vermin and pests and thinking, okay, what are the pests that eat books? And there are things, yeah, there are insects, animals that eat, everything gets eaten by books, but and then simultaneously having discussions with Barry Murnane and thinking about a quote about literature being Kafka's habitat. So thinking about books as habitat and insect societies, insect architecture, wasps' nests and termite mounds, and I decided I would create some sort of habitat from a tower of books that was the epicenter of the piece. So I bought lots of old entomology books and cut them up, which felt kind of wrong. And the book tower, I guess it sort of became alive. I had a vague plan, but the way I work, I kind of have an idea in my head and it's sort of vague, but then it evolves as I'm making it and kind of is affected by the materials that I'm using. But this book tower has these kind of twisting worm-like forms burrowing through it. And the idea is that they're burrowing through the different books, and then there's this sort of cross-pollination of the different text and images and transformations going up through the book tower and then coming out, spewing out of the top, so illustrations and then real insects as well, and then swarming through the case, and then but with other things interacting with the other books in the case. And then the swarm descends to another sculpture on the other side, which is inspired by Report to an Academy. It's a chimp skull. So I don't quite understand what's going on there, but it's more about, I think we've gone from sort of habitat to a more kind of specific comment on man's kind of domination and use and relationship with animals. And there's a lot of, there's many kind of different insects in the piece, most of them kind of pests, not in my not in my mind, but lots of wasps and flies, ants, beetles, caterpillars. I mean, there's all sorts of things, but there's also these humanoid skeletal fairy, kind of half human, half insect. I call them fairy skeletons, and they're protagonists in my work for a long time, but they're also a part of this ecosystem within the case, and I think that they're part of the story, although I don't quite understand the story or exactly what's going on, but then it kind of evolves, I think, over time through the making and then the installing and then the observing of it. Normally I make installations, usually for gallery spaces. I really love the opportunity to kind of work in non-art gallery spaces and make work in response to something. Although I felt quite intimidated by this project because of Kafka, and slightly intimidated by the academics, just because I feel like I didn't really know enough about Kafka. But that was okay. Like, kind of, happy to guide and share knowledge. But it's also, I suppose I normally kind of work on my own without input or suggestions from other people. So at times it was interesting. It felt a little bit like being a student again and having tutorials and kind of rigorous interrogation of the thoughts and ideas, which I kind of struggle to put into words, to struggle to express anyway. And normally when I'm installing works in galleries, it's kind of sort of focused, and there's kind of not that many people around. But here I felt almost like I felt an affinity to the hunger artist, kind of trapped in this vitrine, but kind of wanting to be in there, but also as a tricky environment, but there were lots of other people in the space, and felt like I was being watched, but didn't want to be watched, and just felt like, felt like a strange performance. And then sort of navigating around the books and worrying that I was going to destroy things. But also I loved being in there and becoming immersed in the work and in the world, and thinking about Kafka, but also thinking about kind of resonating with his own insecurities about his work, because I felt like the piece wasn't, it could carry on evolving. It wasn't quite finished. They literally had to drag me out of the case just before the opening. It was just like, I was just desperately trying to change the height of a beetle, and I did go back a few weeks later to add some more bits. So it's like I can't stop, and it's partly because I think it's partly the feeling that it's never good enough, but it's also I think the fact that I want to be in that world, and I want to be immersed in it, and kind of carry on playing and creating. And actually, when the exhibition finishes, the work will probably become something else. That's what I tend to do. My work, unless things kind of sell, it continues to sort of evolve and transform into other things. So the story evolves.